Hello, this is Nicole with Cut and Edge Crafts, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create a twig leaf cut file using Inkscape. So let's jump right in. For this tutorial, we're using Inkscape. I'm going to start today's tutorial by showing you my drawing settings. I think this is important because it's going to affect how different line thicknesses will look on your screen. If your drawing settings match mine, it will be much easier to follow along, and things will also be the size you expect them to be when you import your finished design into Design Space. So let's get started by clicking on the Drawing Properties icon at the top of your screen. Once the Drawing Properties window is open, I want you to take a look at your display units and make sure that they are set to inches. We're also going to look at the units under Custom Size and make sure that those are set to inches as well. Then I'm going to take a look at my width and height, and I'm going to change the width to 3 inches and the height to 3 inches as well. Finally, I'm going to come down to the section marked scale, and I'm going to make sure that the scale X value is set to 72 user units per inch. This is what's going to tell Cricut Design Space that an inch in our program is the same thing as an inch in their program. So now we're going to close the Document Properties window, and I want you to look at your drawing space. You should have a box that is 3 inches by 3 inches high. You can zoom into that box by clicking the 5 key on your keyboard, or you can look up at the top and there is a magnifying glass button that says Zoom to Fit, and if you click that, it'll zoom in to your drawing space that we set in our Drawing Properties window. So now we're going to come over to the toolbar on the left-hand side of your screen and click the Create Spiral button. But before I actually draw my spiral, I wanted you to notice that my turns are set to 4, my divergence is set to 0, and my inner radius is set to 0. So when I go to draw my spiral, it's not going to look like a spiral, it's going to look like a circle, but that's okay. I'm going to show you that here in a second. To draw your spiral, you're going to click in the center of your square, and you're just going to drag it out until it looks about the right size. So my circle is about 2 inches, and I'm going to make sure that it's actually 2 inches by selecting it with the selection tool and setting its height and width to 2 for both of those values. So if you didn't change your spiral settings when you initially drew your spiral, you can go ahead and go back and do that now, and just select the spiral again with the spiral tool and make sure that the turns are set to 4, the divergence is set to 0, and the inner radius is set to 0. And then your spiral should look like mine. So now we're going to come up to Path, and we're going to select Path Effects. And then I'm going to come over to this Path Effects toolbar that pops up, click the plus sign, and if I scroll down, you're going to find one that says Roughen. So we're going to go ahead and click on that one and click Add. So now you have what looks like a messy set of coils, and we're going to come back over to the Path Effects toolbar, and we're going to mess with these settings to kind of change the look of those lines. I'm going to go ahead and change my max displacement in the Y direction to 0, and I'm going to change the max displacement in the X direction to 15. Now I'm going to come up to the section marked Add Nodes, and I'm going to change the number of segments to 1, and that's just going to kind of smooth out those lines and give it a shape that I like a little bit better. So now to finalize that, I'm going to go ahead and click on the selection tool, select my spiral again, come up to Path, and select Object to Path. This is going to make it so that I have an object that has nodes that I can edit instead of being just a plain spiral. So now we're going to go ahead and edit the nodes, and to do that I'm going to double click on my spiral and I'm going to zoom in, and I have a little gap at the end, so I'm going to go ahead and select both of those endpoints, and I'm going to click my alignment tool, and then under the node section I'm going to click the horizontal and vertical alignment tools, and that's just going to bring those nodes together so that there's no longer a gap between them. At this point I noticed that some of the lines are bunched up on the upper right hand side of my spiral, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom out, and then again with my node editor open, I'm going to kind of just adjust where those lines are falling by tugging on the nodes that are up in that corner, just to kind of spread them out a little bit more and get a shape that I like a little bit better. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on my Fill and Stroke button, which is going to open up my Fill and Stroke toolbar, and I'm going to come over and select the Stroke Paint tab. And now what I'm going to do is just adjust the sliders on my tab until I get that color brown that I want. Now You don't want to select a color from the bottom because that would actually apply a fill, and that's not what we want to do. So you're just going to kind of adjust your hue, saturation, and lightness until you get the color that you want for your wreath. Now I'm going to open up my stroke style toolbar, and I'm going to change inches to pixels because inches is kind of too big of a measure for this particular thing. So I'm going to go ahead and set the width of my stroke to 4, and that's going to give me a kind of nice chunky width to my branches. And then you're going to see me with the node editor open go ahead and just tug on those branches again until I kind of get a little bit more spacing between them, a little bit more definition, and the wreath starts to take on the shape that I want it to have as a final cut file. So I like how this looks. So now we're going to go ahead and start adding some branches and some leaves just to make it a little bit more fun. I'm going to come over and grab my Bezier line tool, and I'm just going to make sure that my mode is set to regular Bezier path and that my shape is set to none. And then I'm going to come down and draw a little triangle by clicking 3 times in a triangle shape and then clicking back on the first node that I created. And I am going to change it to have a fill and no stroke. Then I'm going to come back with my node editor and I'm going to click one of the triangle spokes and I'm going to delete it. This is going to form my leaf, and so now I can kind of tug on those lines, the 2 that are left, until I get a leaf shape that I like. And this is going to be the shape that I manipulate for all of the leaves on the rest of the wreath. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab my Bezier line tool so that I can go ahead and create a branch for my wreath. And I'm going to go ahead and click somewhere on the edge of my wreath, it doesn't matter where, and click a couple of times to form a branch shape. Then you're going to want to hit enter to confirm that command. Now when I created mine, that node in the middle was a little bit too pointy, so I just went ahead and selected it. And up at the top you have an option to set the node to smooth. Then you'll have to grab on the grips that are attached to that node and pull them out a little bit longer, and that'll control how smooth the line is going to curve. Then I went up to the stroke style to make sure that the width of my line was the same width as the rest of the wreath, and I also changed the stroke paint to match the rest of the wreath. Okay, now using the keyboard shortcut Control-C, I made a copy of that branch and then I pasted it with Control-V. And I did this just so that I could use that line multiple times just by rotating it, and I don't have to figure out the curve of the line a second time. So once I have it in another position, I'm just going to pull on the nodes that are attached to it again so that it takes on a shape that makes sense for the side of the wreath that it's on. And then I'm just going to repeat this process again, making a copy of the branch and dragging it to a new position and rotating it until it makes sense for the location that it's at. Okay, now for the last section of this video, I'm going to go ahead and increase the speed because all I'm doing is adding leaves to my wreath. To do this, I selected the leaf shape that I drew earlier, and all I'm doing is making copies of that leaf shape and pasting it at different points around the edge of my wreath and onto the branches. And then I'm manipulating each of the leaves that I paste by either rotating them or tugging on the lines and nodes so that they take on a slightly different shape. In some cases, I decided that the branches that are going around the wreath weren't exactly in the right place, and so you'll see me in a couple of places just adjust how those lines are laying. But that's basically it, and I didn't think that it was necessary to let this run for the full speed that it took me. It did end up taking me about 5, maybe 6 minutes to get all of the leaves in place and looking the way that I wanted them to, just so you have a gauge of how long it might take you to do the same. Okay, once you have all of the leaves and branches where you want them to be, there are still a few things that we have to do so that the wreath cuts out as a single piece. First, we need to turn the branches and the main part of the wreath into a path. Right now it's just a stroke. So to do that, I'm going to very carefully select the wreath body, and I'm going to go up to Path and select Stroke to Path. And then I'm going to do the same for all of the branches on the wreath. And I just very carefully selected all of those together. You could do this individually for each one, but you just want to make sure that all of those branches are paths and not just a stroke. Then I'm going to go ahead and select everything, and I'm going to select union. So now all the individual pieces of the wreath are welded together. If you double click on the wreath and look at the nodes, you will see that there's just a nice clean outline around the edges of the wreath, and all the leaves look like they've been welded on. And that's it. You're ready to save your design so that you can import it into Design Space. To save your file, all you need to do is click on the File tab and click Save As and give your file a name. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that you liked this tutorial and that you feel a little more confident using Inkscape. If you'd like to keep up with me and make sure that you see every new video I release, be sure to subscribe to my channel. You can also follow Cutting Edge Crafts on Facebook and Pinterest, or visit my blog at cuttingedgecrafts.com. See you next time.